Clara Schumann, or should I say Clara Wieck, was a musical child prodigy on a level with Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Or that's what Robert Schumann said to Clara Wieck in a letter. After he read a biography of Wolfgang, he wrote Clara, "He reminds me of you." Now, why would Robert Schumann say that? What was it about Clara Wieck that resembled Wolfgang? The story starts before Clara was even born. Clara Wieck's father, Friedrich, planned for his first child to be a prodigy equal to Wolfgang Mozart. So when Clara was born, you'd think a girl would be a bit of a disappointment, but actually in this case, no. Because by the 1820s, prodigies were a dime a dozen. There were lots of them. So a girl was more of a commodity. And Friedrich was kind of liberal for those days. He believed girls could be educated just as well as boys. But his liberalness kind of stopped there. Because he also believed a girl would be more malleable to a father's will. Less headstrong and more passive than a boy. Ugh. But with that philosophy in mind, Clara's father started her music education when she was 4 years old. But there was one problem. At the age of 4, Clara had not yet spoken a single word. Clara's father actually worried that she was deaf or just stupid. Ugh, so much ignorance in those days. Anyway, then little Clara started picking out melodies that she'd heard on the piano as a 4-year-old. So they realized pretty quick that even though she wasn't talking yet, she was actually super smart and a really promising musical ear. So at age 5, her father started giving her an hour piano lesson every morning, followed by 2 hours of practice, then hours of music study, which means Clara learned to read and write music before she learned the alphabet. She was improvising at the piano before she was even speaking in full sentences. Clara Wieck learned all her scales and her arpeggios by age 6. By age 7, she could improvise in every key and identify all keys by ear, as in she already had perfect pitch as a 7-year-old. I quit. Why did I even go to music school? Anyway, via special hand strengthening exercises, she could play octaves by the age of 8. And that same year, she played her first Wolfgang Mozart piano concerto with chamber orchestra and gave her first performance at the Leipzig Gewandhaus when she was 9 years old. So you see what I mean by a true musical prodigy who was on a historic level of musical genius. Lots of musicians, including Robert Schumann and Johannes Brahms, were seriously jealous of Clara's early childhood music education. But it wasn't just about her education. Clara was also just a musical genius. And we know this because her first opus, her Polonaises, which she wrote at the age of 9, survive. And they're ridiculous. Like, what 9-year-old wrote this? She played them for none other than Niccolò Paganini, the superstar violinist. He was so impressed by Clara's compositions, he invited her to sit on stage with him during his concerts at the Gewandhaus. Honestly, I don't know how that worked. Talk about awkward, just sitting there while he plays. After he heard Clara play her compositions, he called her a genuine artist. So now Clara goes on her first concert tour, becoming a money-making performer as a 10-year-old. She performs at the Palace in Dresden. She goes to Weimar and plays for Goethe, the playwright and poet who basically started Romanticism. Goethe gave her an artist's medal and said she plays with the strength of 6 boys. That's right, 6. They were always doing this, Clara's whole life, comparing her to boys and men and how she was better than them. Why she couldn't just be a girl who was also a genius is a whole other topic. Incidentally, around this time was when Robert Schumann first heard Clara play at a party when he was 18. Yeah, that age gap was kind of sus. Moving on. Clara published her first opus, her Polonaises, when she was 11, and by age 12, she was off on her first international concert tour to Paris. Paris, in the 1830s, was kind of a hotspot for artists. Clara met Friedrich Chopin and Felix Mendelssohn, rambunctious 20-year-olds as they were at the time. She heard them play their compositions, but she also watched them wrestle on the floor at a soiree. Not exactly how one pictures famous composers, bear fighting and rolling around on the floor. Clara got back home. She was the first to play works of the new composer Friedrich Chopin in Germany. At the time, everyone thought they were unplayable, until little 12-year-old Clara was like, nope, I can do it. She started playing her entire repertoire from memory, which was just not done at that point. But once a little girl was doing it, all the men had to do it too. Nothing like being a trendsetter as a 12-year-old, or should I say, founder of the tradition of memorization that continues to torture all pianists to this day. At age 13, Clara Wieck started orchestration lessons, as in learning how to compose for orchestra. She'd already published 3 opuses of solo piano works, and was now studying violin and writing for orchestra, because that was the next step. She studied with the music director at the St. Thomas School, which was also the church where J.S. Bach had worked. So yeah, she was studying composition with Bach's successor. Incidentally, Richard Wagner was there at the same time, taking orchestration lessons with the same teacher, except he was 20 and Clara was 13. She composed waltzes for orchestra, which were performed twice with orchestra, but the orchestral scores were lost. They were only published in her arrangement for solo piano as her Opus 4. She also composed an orchestral overture, which was lost, but she also started composing her piano concerto that year. Thankfully, we have that one, it survived. But in addition to all this composing, Clara was still giving concerts all over Germany. She performed on over 30 concerts that season. As a 13-year-old, she had a busier schedule than most 20-year-olds. A full-time professional making serious money on both her composing and her performing. And just to emphasize, none of this was normal. It all sounds great to have this amazing education and great career so young, but in reality, it wasn't. It was child exploitation. Clara Wieck never had a real childhood. She never went to regular school. She wasn't allowed to play with other children. Later in life, Clara Schumann would say many times, "I sacrificed my childhood for art." Clara Wieck finished orchestrating her concerto at age 15, just when Felix Mendelssohn came to Leipzig. The 25-year-old was the new music director of the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra, and he and Clara became fast friends. They bonded immediately. He came to her 16th birthday party and made her laugh by playing Bach fugues in the style of their colleagues Chopin and Liszt. Musical jokes between two child prodigies. Clara premiered her concerto the month after her 16th birthday, with Felix conducting the Gewandhaus Orchestra. It was also published that year as her Opus 7. There's so much to say about this concerto. All the other composers of the time either heard it or played it and were influenced by it, including Robert Schumann, Franz Liszt, and later Johannes Brahms. It was a very important work of the Romantic era, on the level of the concertos of Friedrich Chopin and Felix Mendelssohn. It was also historic because of how old Clara was when she wrote it. At age 16, Clara Wieck was younger than all the other canon composers when she published her first concerto. Yes, she was even younger than Wolfgang Mozart. So, I really am trying to say that there is all the solid proof that she was on an equal level with all the famous dudes of the time. 2 years later, at the age of 18, Clara debuted in Vienna, and her concerto and her Opus 8 concert variations were lauded and encored for 3 performances. The Austrian emperor crowned her imperial court virtuoso, the first young person, Protestant, and woman to receive the honor. Clara Wieck was the first to perform Ludwig's complete Appassionata Sonata in public from memory, which the poet Franz Grillparzer wrote a poem saying she played Beethoven better than the busy horde of little men. The public was all abuzz with the Clara War, debating the question, who's better, Clara Wieck or Franz Liszt? She became an internationally famous virtuoso composer at the age of 18. Yes, Clara Wieck was a household name before she even married that little-known composer, Robert Schumann. That's the basics of the prodigy career of Clara Wieck Schumann. There were lots of other women musical prodigies who rivaled the men in those days, like Maria Anna Mozart, Wolfgang's older sister, and Fanny Hensel, the older sister of Felix Mendelssohn, just to start with a couple. So next time someone talks about musical geniuses and tries to say Mozart was the greatest ever, as though that's not up for debate, remind them he had some serious competition in women like Clara Wieck. I'm almost afraid to say please debate this in the comments, but that's what this is all about. Please go ahead. Thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe. Let me know what you think. Also, feel free to follow me on social media or subscribe to my newsletter, check out my blog for lots more information on the infamous Clara Wieck Schumann.